is, um, how does compliance come up when you're when you're getting new clients, when you're having those conversations where you're building relationships?
Mhm,
They're not a client yet, but
mhm,
you're having conversations in advance.
mhm.
How does having these kinds of tools, these kinds of best practices, change that conversation that you're having with them, or impact that conversation?
So it's actually the first thing right away when we start about cloud. So we're a cloud first solution partner. I mentioned that. And we're not a cloud first solution partner because we think that cloud is super fancy and SaaS is just a great word, or being in the cloud is super great. But um, there are actually a lot of benefits to go to cloud. And so security, compliance, and legal is one of the first things we touch upon. And it's the first thing we need, especially in Germany, not speaking of highly regulated environments. So the first buy-in we need is from security, compliance, and legal departments before we go to procurement or the CTO, um, and have their thumbs up.
So it's absolutely central.
Yeah, and
I'm
it's the first
wondering,
thing we start with when we have a conversation with a new client.
I wonder if we can move to Randy. You said something. I remember you said something about compliance being not an obstacle, but a profit center. I wonder if you can elaborate more on
Yeah.
that.
So the devices we create, everything in medtech is about taking a risk-based approach, right? How much risk and how much value and what are the trade-offs? And generally that's around risk to human beings versus benefit to human beings. But the truth is we take a risk-based approach as business people to our products or to our devices. Everything's a trade-off about what can you do. And a lot of times there's business decisions to be made about what is good enough, right? Because there's never a clear answer on what is good enough. So you have to take an approach, and the more you can empower the people spending the money to make that decision, the better it is for the business, and frankly, the better it is for the compliance people because it means they're no longer on the hook for getting
Mhm.
blamed because they very clearly laid out to somebody the options that you want to take a riskier approach. That's fine. Here's the possible impacts. Sign on the dotted line. You know. So I think there's a lot of that, and really if you bake that into your culture, you could be a much more effective product organization, a much more effective product organization. You're going to have fewer surprises. If something goes wrong and you're like, oh, this didn't work, but now we have to throw everything away and start over. That was a decision. That was a business decision, not something that somebody found out where the executives, what do you mean now we have to start over? You didn't tell me that before. So that's kind of how I would put it in a general sense. And I think it's also in general how regulatory and quality and compliance people get a seat at the table. Because either you can be there's three kind of ways you can go. And I actually happen to be married to a healthcare compliance attorney who works with very entrepreneurial organizations. So I've healthcare organizations. So I've seen this. You could be Dr. No, and the answer to everything is no, because it's not. Why? Not because the law itself doesn't say you can't do it, because I've never seen it done that way. That's not
Mhm.
how we've done it, right? Which has more to do with history and culture. It's more like how you interpret the Bible. Well, there weren't guns in the Bible, so what does the Bible say about guns, right? Um, you have a Dr. Yes who says, do whatever you want. I don't care. Usually that's the person who gets left holding the bag when it goes really south. You look at major corporate scandals and it's always the attorney or the compliance person who's being left holding the bag. Um, and then there's people who are business partners who can really say, it's not no or yes, it's tell me what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it. And then let me help you get there. Because maybe the way you're talking about doing it, we can't do, but there's another way to get there. You're being a business partner. And frankly, when those people then say, no, 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 I'm sorry, that's a bright red line we can't cross, they get a lot more respect for it because people know that they're really thoughtful and they don't just reflexively say no or yes to everything. So that would be my larger context. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Thanks, Randy. And I wonder, Marion, if you could touch on this question. I know you're coming from a completely different place. It's not really a
Yeah.
question for you, but I wonder if you could touch on it.
So, I mean, I think we very often talk to two different people, a set of people in, let's say, a medical device company. There, there is a Jira admin who is normally the advocate of Atlassian tool stack and goes like, "Oh, these are really cool tools, and they should be, used across the entire enterprise. And why are we using, standalone tools for compliance if this can all be done in Atlassian or on Atlassian?" And the first person that we then talk to is the regulatory and quality manager. And to your question of what it is they want to, or they check with us is basically, do we know their pain? Do we understand what they need to go through? And if we can prove and tell them that we understand and we know the regulations, we know the requirements that you need to meet, this is something that kind of clicks in their head and goes like, okay, so not only do they have the tools, but they know my pain, and they made these tools to meet and take away this pain from companies like mine. And that is a huge thing for them. I think it's almost always the first thing that they touch upon. They kind of give you the keywords and almost see your reaction to like, okay, do you know what I'm talking about? And if you go like, yeah, we deal with these regulations and requirements all the time. That's basically why we are here. We are here to help companies like yours. Then they will automatically kind of go like, oh, at least somebody gets me, because sometimes, and I think Monica can probably say that that's very often the case, that the quality compliance people, although times are different, there are still organizations where they kind of don't really have not really integrated fully into their software development team, and sometimes they are still thought of as somebody that comes in and asks these really intricate difficult questions, and we don't want to deal with them, and they kind of impede the speed that we want to develop at, and so they find us as their kind of also the partner of talking to the developers and the admins of how to set up everything in the Atlassian tool stack, so that like Melissa and Randy were saying, that safety by design would be obvious, that you think of quality while you develop, not as an afterthought. And thereby you actually are much safer, your product will be safer, and you will win the time, and of course the client's accountability in the eyes of the client.